We're in the final stages of making our macro. We have finally gotten to the point of starting to put together what our UI is actually going to look like. Today, we are still adjusting some things with our comp, and we're going to be making an effect that looks a little bit like this. So the point of this is not just to have cool effects on it. It kind of is, but it's also just to give the user more options. And it's a good practice for setting up like a process in order to add different things, different aspects to your effect as people want. Let's say they want to add a mask. You can just click a button and it'll add a mask into the comp. In the last week or so, I actually came up with some ideas for what we could do for the UI. So let's go and take a look at those right over here on our new camera. So this is just my phone being set up over here, but something fun about this is I'm using the Blackmagic camera app, which means all the footage that I'm recording will be instantly transferred to the project I'm working in for this video. So I'm going to see how it works out. You're going to see how it looks and works out, connecting straight over the cloud. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. So I'm thinking about starting off with a tab or page called master, or just controls or transform, something like that. And this is where all of the like master transform node is going to have all the controls for, and we're going to add that into the comp here in a minute. And it's also where all of our effects are going to go that we are going to make today. So we're going to have a glow, a shadow, and a raise effect for the user to toggle on and off. And the controls are going to show and hide for each of the different effects. We also have a colors. This is going to have us control the button colors, border colors, and mouse colors. And then we're also going to have the animations. This is going to be a little bit more bare bones. We're going to get into some more complex ideas of setting up more interesting UIs when it comes to this stuff. Because animations can be very powerful to create your own animation engine and give the user a lot of power over the actual engine itself. But we're just going to make it bare bones. We're going to give them the ability to adjust the seconds that things take. We're not going to give the ability to change how the animation works, but we will just like give them the ability to change the curves, some offsets, lengths of animations, and I think also the values that they go to. But we can do a lot more with this in the future. To get started, let's move over our media out and let's start adding just a transform node in here. So we're going to do shift space, type in XF to bring in a transform node, and we're going to press F2 to rename it to master XF for master transform shorthand. And then after this, we're going to start adding all of the actual effects. To put the effects together in sort of like an effects layer manager, we're going to use a multi-merge node, which I think is a great use for the multi-merge node. We're going to just selecting our master FX, type in multi-merge, and we're just going to start adding our effects, which is going to be a shadow, which we're going to do a drop shadow, not a real shadow. We're going to do a regular glow, just the standard glow, and then we're going to add a raise, which I believe comes free with Resolve, I think. And we're going to connect the output from master transform into each of these, not overlapping the connections. So each of these are getting a clean feed of the original comp. So it's getting the clean version of this. It's not getting this stacked with this, stacked with this. So if we start putting all these onto the multi-merge now by just dragging the out and dropping on top of the node, it'll auto-select which output it's supposed to go to, since these have dynamic inputs. And as we can see, we have a sunny, bright mess. What we have to do is just start adjusting our controls. And I'm going to take down threshold, exposure, and weight, and mess with decay a little bit. I might decrease glow and glow size a bit. Also disable alpha on glow. That will oftentimes on a video cause weird translucency to where you can still see through it, but it's like a wrong color. And then we also want to go into raise and disable merge over. It's gonna make things look a little bit differently over here. But if we preview this, we are just taking the raise output and we're not getting the actual image. If we start to toggle these off from the multi-merge, just with the checkboxes, we can see even though there is a glow and there is a raise, you can still clearly see a shadow behind it. There's still clearly a glow on it, and there's still clearly raise on it. And if you toggle them on and off without raise, you can clearly see that they're there. If you remember back to a few videos ago, I did show off a system where you can do this exact same thing. And we're going to be doing that mixed with getting controls and everything set up for other things as well. So we're going to start setting up our controls node. This is what I recommend everybody does whenever they make a macro. If they're about ready to start exporting, create an alpha divide node. This is essentially just the settings page of every other node, and you can add controls onto this. I'm going to set it to pass through by just doing Control and P, but it also can do this with the checkbox. F2 to rename, and I'm just going to call this controls. This is going to work just as our easy controls node without having to worry about having a bunch of other controls in there for no reason. Right click, and we're going to start to add buttons to toggle these effects on and off. And we're gonna just create the buttons and nothing else. So let's go ahead and start with, we're gonna create two different buttons, one for on, one for off. Let's go ahead and add a button for shadow on, or we can even do enable shadow to make it, I don't know, a little bit more official feeling. Do button, and we're gonna make the width, the default, which is gonna be 1. We're going to want it on the user page, and we are okay with having animatable and passive. Integer, we don't have to really set any of these values because these don't matter. And this does not matter either. We can go ahead and press OK. And now we just have a blank button that does nothing. If we go up to workspace, console, ignore my errors, we can see if we try to do anything with this, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to print. It's just an empty button that is doing nothing. Let's go ahead and make multiple of these. We can go into our controls, find enable shadow, and if we were to just change the ID to disable shadow, and then change our name to that, now this is a brand new button, but with the exact same settings. So that's an easy way to just copy settings from one button to another, or from any control to another. There we go. We have all of our buttons in here now, but once again, none of them do dick diddly. What we have to do is start coding these buttons. Now, if you remember, a couple videos ago, I did go over how we do that, and we're just going to do the exact same process. So I'm going to slightly skip over this, pretty much. Go check out the video up in the iCard, I think over here, and you'll get caught up really quick and easy with all the information on that. But we're just going to skim through this information because I've already talked about it. All right, just to go ahead and show this off so that we can jump straight into doing other stuff, this is the code for turning the button on. And then all we have to do for turning the button off is copy this and then set this to true. So it's going to be set to pass through, and then set these to both be nil, not mil, nil. And that's going to just disconnect any inputs that were on, that were set before. So we can go and paste this into the two buttons for our shadow, and then our shadow should be functional. We can come into our user controls, come on down here and find enable shadow. We're going to take our code from off screen, copy, go up here to execute, and paste. You're good to go. We can go ahead and press OK, and I'm going to copy the off code and put that into our disable. Now, if you were to press disable shadow, we should see this turns pass through on, so it should turn gray like this one, and then this should disconnect and this should disconnect. So let's take a look. Perfect. That's exactly what's happening. If we enable it, bam, super easy stuff. Makes this so easy, and that's what we're going to do for everything. So now if we come in here and disable raise, we're going to see that raise turns off and disconnects. Re-enable it, we're good there. And disable and re-enable glow. Looks like we are a hunky-dory with all of our buttons. We're going to add some nests onto here really quick for our hiders. So we're going to have a hider for the enable button and for the disable button, and we're going to have that a thing for each different kind of effect. So we're going to have enable hider shadow, and then we're going to make it a label, integer, show arrow, and we're going to hide the next, we're just going to say 5 controls because we don't really know for sure. We can always change this later in the code. And we're going to change this from animatable to passive. With all that done, we can press OK, And now we are going to copy the node and hop into a text editor. Now I like talking about how much I love VS Code, but this time why don't we hop into something a little bit different and check out Notepad++. First we're going to put a comma down here at the end, copy all of this up to here so we have a blank space. So all we have to do is click on the previous line and paste, and it just adds it right below there. And we're going to do disable for both of these. And now we have our two templates that we're going to be copying over and over again and replacing shadow with each of the effects. If you hold Control and drag, you can select multiple things at once. So we're just going to select all instances of shadow for these two that we just created, and we're going to replace these with just the word glow. Now if we Control A, Control C, and go back into our comp here, let's delete our controls node right here and paste in our other controls node that we have in our copy. And we can see nothing's changed. What's going on here? Oh. So many nests. And they're all labeled correctly. Crazy stuff. Now we're going to have these visible for now, but we do want to add some code into here to make it easier to change the visibility later on. For each of these, we're going to be pasting in a single line of code. We're going to be coming in right below everything else and just pasting in IC visible equals true. And when the macro is all said and done, we'll search for this exact line and then replace true with false for each of these. And that's going to make it super easy to make your hiders invisible after you've done all your testing. And that'll make a little bit more sense as we go along. And we're going to see that nothing really has changed. We can still see all of our hiders. But just to show you what this is going to do when you actually have your controls, you can see we have all the hiders shown here, and we can see our master hider here. If we just change this top one to say false, if I can spell false without having a stroke, we can paste it, and then all of our controls are gone. But they're not gone, they're just invisible. So let's quickly actually show you how we're going to make this work. Let's go into our button code. So hop into your controls, look for, we're going to do enable shadow. And at the very end of enable shadow, we are going to set one of these values to 1 so it's open. We're just going to grab the topmost one, so enable hider shadow. This is the one that's invisible. And we're going to be doing controls dot and then that name. This is going to be calling to the controls node to the control ID of this. We're going to set it equal to 1, and that's just going to set the value of that control to 1. We're going to press OK and enable, and we can see we have our hider now being shown. We can reset our node back to how it was so we don't have that problem anymore. And we can see all of our controls sitting happy right here. But we do want to do that for each of these controls. We do want to set those values in here. But we don't want to do them in here because this can be a little bit annoying. I'm going to copy this and paste it into here. And the only thing we have to pay attention to is if we're going to be using quotation marks, we have to put a backslash right before the quotation mark. And that's really the only syntax we have to pay attention to when making code in here. But we can do sort of a semicolon to help break up the code, at least visually for us looking at it in the straight line format. And we're just going to be adding in the same code that we had in before. So controls dot and then the control name. So we're going to take enable hider shadow, paste it in there and set it equal to 1. This is for raise, so we're just going to update it for raise. This is for disabling the raise. And since this is the disable raise button, we don't want to hide the disable raise control. We want to hide the enable control. Or no, we want to show the enable control. Sorry, I'm getting my terminology backwards. So this is going to be making the enable button visible after we click disable raise. And along with this, we're then going to do controls dot disable hider raise. And we're going to do the opposite and do that at 0. So when you press disable, it's going to show enable and then hide disable. Hopefully that's getting to you. We can paste it in here. And if we start pressing buttons over here, we're going to start seeing these things opening and closing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the hider for enable and put it before the enable control in our list here, which we can do just like that. And we're going to do that for disable and then for all the different effects. Make sure that you have a comma for that last entry. And let's go ahead and paste this back into the comp, and we should see that it looks like they're all open, which is good. That's what we're hoping that it would look like. Let's change all of the num inputs right here. This is how many controls each label is hiding. So if we were to just select this and do a control F, that's going to look for all of them. And we're going to replace with, we copy this, paste it in here. We're going to replace them with just hiding a single control, which is in this case the button. Now things look a little bit cleaner. Now they actually have their own individual divisions. If we enable shadow, we have the disable button shown, disable it, the enable button shown, and disable glow, disable raise, enable raise. And this is how it's going to kind of function, not look, but it's how it's going to function on our macro. I think what we should do next is start making some other labels for the different things. So we're going to start with a master label. We're just going to make a label for transform. This is going to be for our master transform node. This is what all those controls are going to be going into, and we can make this just integer. Show arrow. We're just going to hide 1, just so that there's a value in there. We're going to make it passive and okay. And we're just going to keep adding them for each of these. All right, and there's going to be a couple of final touches to get our controls actually looking kind of presentable. We're going to take our node once again and paste it into this file. And we're going to see we have a lot more controls this time. We're going to come up to our first one, transform, and we're going to give this one actually some embedded HTML to add some style to it. In our case, we're just going to be adding some color, but you can add bolding, italics, underline, strike through. You can make it a certain header size. You can do quite a lot of things with just a single line that you have available to you. We have to go into the links name of the user control, put in a left bracket arrow thingy majig, whatever they're called. We're going to put in font, space, color, equals, and then 2 parentheses, and we're just going to close off the front of the call, the HTML call, and then we're just going to put one at the end to do a / and font to just close it off. And in color, we can do a bunch of different colors. We can do like dark red, red, brown, magenta, turquoise, tan, sun, gold, maybe not sun, but you can do quite a lot. So we might do one page is blue, then the next page is maybe gold, blue and gold, and then the next page maybe X, the next page maybe Y. Make sure that your colors are not capitalized, that's my bad. So make sure that you don't have any capitals in your stuff. We should be good though. Okay. So it may look like it just been a second for you, but for me it's actually been a little while because I had to figure out why it wasn't working. For labels, they actually handle differently than a UI element, which I was getting the other information from. Labels handle things through the stylings. So we have to put it in a P style, so it is like a paragraph instead of a header. If you wanted to make this a header, you'd change out P for H1, H2, H3, H4, and that would make it the different sizes. And we just set the style, color, and then we can put in a word for whatever we want this to be. So for instead of blue, I might change these two because I saw that they were a little bit hard to see. I might change these to light blue, just so that they're a little bit easier to see. But as you can see, it is pretty close to what I showed you before. We just have the opening and then P space style equals, and then we have a parenthesis or a quotation mark. This is using the single quote because in Lua and other languages like this one, you have to put a single quote instead of a double quote so that the string does not get confused, because if you had a double quote here it would think that this entry would just end after equals. We have the master transform before the effects because we want the effects to be changing it after it's scaled down so that they're not getting cut off on the edges of the comp that this is being bound by. So I will happily see you in the next episode. Look forward to the release of a new tool, maybe related to macros, coming in maybe a couple of weeks. Stay tuned. There may or may not be a new macro creator on the market here in the next couple weeks. I don't know. Some little birdie told me. Check out this video over here to get introduced to scripting for DaVinci Resolve, and in the third episode, learn about making your first UI. And next week, we're making even crazier stunts with the UI. All right. I'll see you there. Happy animating.